Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. And welcome to a rather sparse Yogananda podcast today. We do not have our dear companions, friends, Lauren and Mike with us today, but they are here with us in spirit. But we do have Guru Santusa, myself, and Priyank. We got the memo of the blue shirt and blue t-shirts there.
Why?
We are here holding the fort and continuing with chapter 10 of the Autobiography of a Yogi, line by line, where we're in part 2. And we are continuing from a very interesting, slightly longer part that we covered last episode, a couple of pages of the first chapter, or chapter 10, sorry, where Yogananda essentially was, falling back on guidance of God to get himself through some of the literal tests in life that he had through schooling. And he did very, very well on that. So we're continuing on from this leg of Yogananda's life and his journey. And it's a short part that we'll cover today. And if you do want to read on along with us, you can start from the line that says, "In my new dignity," and you can finish with us at the description of Swami Dayananda on the line, "His fair face had a Buddha-like composure." So if you want to pause and read along, we're going to cover a shorter but quite action-packed part today. So jumping into it, we are really looking at quite a interesting, pivotal, I don't know how to describe it really, but quite a monumentous time where there was a lot of build up to this point, really, where Yogananda is finally, openly planning to leave home. There's no sort of smoke and mirrors and sort of running away with friends at a certain time and changing clothes, and there's no deception. He's open to discussing his plans to leave home. And I suppose this comes with the territory of being a little bit older. He's now a bit more independent, and he's done the duties of his schooling and so on, his education. So he's getting to that point where it is about time that maybe he's looking to follow his own dreams and passions. So he's openly talking about it now, Priyank.
Yeah, in a bit of a brazen way, like a brazenly youthful way that only the youthful do. With I like in my new dignity, I was openly, before it was obviously lots of secrets where he tried to sneak away to the Himalayas and other places, whereas now he's embraced his right to do so. Would you say?
Yeah, he's definitely embracing, and much to his father's dismay. We're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. He has not given up the goal, the hope of becoming a monk, or at least following his spiritual path. So he is, he's focused and he's pursuing that path wholeheartedly.
Let's assume that he's 18 at this stage. For a Western audience, an 18-year-old saying, "I'm leaving home now," is probably nothing to be surprised at, really, because he's an adult now and if he's got a job, he can move away or go to university and all those things. But in India, their children they definitely do live with their parents till marriage. So to leave the home is not only is it frowned upon in a way because you're neglecting your family responsibilities, it's a little bit taboo culturally. So the fact that he's made a big deal about this, and later on father gets quite sad, is because of that cultural thing that's there in India even to this day.
Yeah, and even though we've got a couple of quotes or passages today from Mejda, and even though we sort of said, is Mejda, does that mean sort of middle? What does that mean? He's the second oldest of 8.
Yeah.
Right. So, he is one of the elder siblings, and certainly would be looked to for that leadership role, and for the for the guidance really of the rest of the family. And we're going to talk about the family in a little bit more detail on this episode. So really, we see that Yogananda does have an accomplice this time, so maybe not much has changed. He has Jitendra. And there's a note here to say in the footnotes that this wasn't Jotan Gosh, Jatinder, who was in a very funny story where he had an aversion to tigers, and he sort of went ashen face and thought, well, he doesn't want to be there trying to tame these tigers into pussycats. So not that Jatinder, but this is Jatindra. So he has somebody to leave home with and go in pursuit of God and the spiritual path. And so he decides to join a hermitage in Banaras, and this is quite a pivotal moment. This hermitage we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail, of course, and we can delve into that in a minute. But Priyank,
there's quite a nice section in Swami Satyananda's book, Yogananda as I knew him, in the biography of Yogananda. Swami Satyananda, once again, is the principal of Branchi school later on, so one of his really important childhood friends, Guruji's childhood friends. And in his book, he writes about this very moment. He says he spoke of his feelings of renunciation, particularly with Jitendra, and both of them decided for the time being that they would leave home and go to live in the Bharat Dharma Mahamandal in Banaras, which Chris is going to talk about in a little while. Mukunda gave away his books here and there, sold some of them, and prepared to get ready to go to Banaras. At his instruction, Jitendranath went to Banaras before him. Now there was no running away in secret, and Mukunda spoke about his plan to his father. His father tried in many ways to get him to let go of this idea, but his efforts were fruitless. Even Shastri Mahashaya tried to prevent him from leaving home at that time by presenting him with many kinds of reasons and wisdom. Shastri Mahashaya, you'll remember, is his Sanskrit tutor, which he talked about in a few chapters ago. But Mukunda was unmovable in his focus of vairagya. So this is his vairagya, is essentially renunciation or asceticism. And he said, Swami Satyananda finishes, when this was happening, he all of a sudden sang out a Bengali song right in front of his father, which was about, in quotes, why the delay, or why delay? Now is the time, essentially. So quite a nice little reflection on that important moment from his friend Swami Satyananda.
Yeah, it's a great little passage there. Thanks for pulling that out, Priyank. And it's a good book. Have you read all of that book?
I have, yes.
Yeah, nice.
Worth it.
Yeah, nice, great. There's so much nice reading material around the autobiography of a yogi. I'm glad that we can pull in some of it to the analysis of this line by line of autobiography. Yogi Mejda is another great source as well. So yeah, it adds a lot of color to what's happening. And if you think about it, you've talked about it yourself, Priyank, about finding a guru, and this spiritual journey is quite sort of fraught at times with uncertainty of, where do I go? What teacher should I follow? And I thought to myself, wow, I wonder how Yogananda actually chose this hermitage. Why did he actually single out these people to, as he says, receive its spiritual discipline? Now, if you put yourself into the context of the time, early 20th century, end of the 21st century, end of the 20th century, really, it's a time where the British are in India, and there is a rule there, and there's a lot of conversion from, say, Hinduism to Catholic faith, or Christianity, sorry. And that would have been met with some resistance in some way. The orthodoxy of the sort of spiritual doctrine at the time, that was challenged, and that was trying to be replaced by, not only the Christianity, but the language as well, right? So English speaking language. So it was going to be a time of turmoil. And there was certainly a movement of people that were passionate about trying to remain in some Hindu sort of orthodoxy, that we'll sort of talk about in a moment. But so this was the hermitage. So if we look at the hermitage of what it was, the Bharat Dharma Mahamandal. So that was a prominent Hindu organization, and it was founded by, he was a scholar, sort of a well-known scholar in Sanskrit and many others, called Pandit Din Dayalu Sharma in Hardwar, and that was in 1887. So that was later moved to Banaras. The headquarters was moved. I think, yeah, he later went on to found the Hindu College in Delhi in 1899. So here's someone who was very passionate about trying to keep the roots, let's say, of India, there, and not lost to the sort of sands of time, as it were, and the changes that were going on at the time. Priyank, I'll come to you before I continue here.
Yeah, just reflecting on what you just said. So firstly, Bharat Dharma Mahamandal means the great circle of Dharma in India. Bharat being the ancient word for, well, ancient name for India. And as you mentioned, yeah, there was some this is some fight back essentially from the Western ideology on philosophy and religion, but also there were grassroots organizations that tried to do a bit of both, essentially. And I mentioned Brahmo Samaj previously that Vivekananda was part of, and Master Mahashaya was part of as well before he before they pledged their allegiance to Ramakrishna Paramhansa. But there was another similar organization called Arya Samaj, which kind of tried to retain some of Hinduism and trying to push back against some of the injustice parts of it, like the caste or other, caste system, child marriages, or all the kind of stuff that you wouldn't associate with modern society. So that was that. And this organization, as Chris rightly said, is the Bharat Mahamandal. They tried to basically fight back and basically say that there's a place for ancient Indian thought in modern day living, and so they try to re-preach the importance of the principles of Sanatan Dharma, which we'll talk about later, and essentially just all around bringing back the ancient ideals that have kind of been suppressed or lost, and putting it into a new light. Everything from ashrams to educational institutions, to temples. So lots of they touched a lot of the different elements of the culture.
Yeah, and so I mentioned it was 1887 where it was founded in Hardwar, but moved to Banaras, and it was 1905. So a little bit of time later, moved to Banaras, and in 1902, so maybe had something to do with some of the move to Banaras. It was given a new direction and vision by Swami Satyananda, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Yeah, there was others, in the organization that helped to sort of push the organization along by the devotees, the patrons, the disciples, to give it a new direction. But this was the organization, the hermitage, that our guru Yogananda was very much interested, and it does make a lot of sense to me. Priyank, he's been fiercely loyal and passionate about India, or Bharat, to say that they were his last words, really, weren't they? That came out of his mouth. So yeah, very, very, very much in line actually with what I would expect Yogananda would be interested at that time in following.
You mentioned Swami Gyanananda, and who took over and who was in charge of this hermitage, where that Yogananda took part of. And then later in this section, we're going to talk about Swami Dayananda, So just differentiate between the head of the organization, which is Gyanananda, and of him, of which there's a picture of him later in the book when Guruji comes back to India when he's, in the 1930s, when he comes back to India, and he visits all the various saints and sages around India, and there's a picture of Yogananda sitting him at his feet. So that's later in the book, but obviously that's the head, Swami Gyanananda, as we're mentioning here, which is different from Dayananda, which was in charge of, basically a manager in charge of the ashram and the boys, which we're going to talk about much more in this chapter about him.
Great. Do you mind me saying that you're going to do a big journey, a big travel
Oh, yes.
world to India?
Yeah.
That's coming up soon. Are you going to hit Banaras up?
Of course. Can't leave that out. So I'm essentially going to, if people have seen the Dayamata short film In His Footsteps, where she does a trip around all the places that Guruji went to when he went back to India. I'm also going to hopefully do that same thing. Be in a couple of weeks, so I'll keep you guys updated on that, and hopefully I can carry on joining the podcast during that time.
Yeah. Do some vlogging, video
Yes.
blogging.
Yes.
Where you go, we'd all want to see and follow along with you. Yeah, there's some nice pictures online, really, of the hermitage in Banaras, and it's this kind of bright, sort of orangey red, colored building. Very, very lovely building from the outside, certainly. And there's some nice pictures there, of it. So yeah, very colorful, sort of bright, big building. Maybe you can go take a brand new picture of it, print, when you're over there.
Yeah, I will do. You mentioned that it's in Banaras, and you'll know that later on in the footnotes, Banaras is also called Varanasi, the ancient name Kashi as well, and that was also the spot of Lady Mahashai's home. So Yogananda never mentions this, but I'm sure he went to to take pilgrimage of Master Lahiri Mahashai's home there, because that organization or spin-offs organizations from Lahiri Mahashai's children and other associates still carried on. So there would have been some elements of satsangas and other things that are happening, which would have been down the road. So no doubt he would have gone there, but that's we don't know.
Yeah. He did. He hasn't mentioned. He hasn't mentioned that, has he? It wouldn't be in the Mejda book at all.
It's not in there, no.
Cover to cover as well.
No.
Interesting. Well, Yogananda is reflecting on this time that he was leaving to take the spiritual discipline at this new hermitage, but it wasn't easy for him. He really, as it says here, a desolation fell over him on one day when he thought about separating himself really from his family. And since his mum passed, he had grown very close, he had tender sort of feelings towards his younger brothers and sister, Thamu, and the two brothers, Sananda and Vishnu. And there's not much actually in the book of these three at all, really. It doesn't actually go into a lot of detail about any of his stories or anything related to his family, beyond his sort of elder brother, who sort of chased him around a few times already, and as we've seen in the Autobiography of Yogi. So there's a little bit that we can talk about here, and I managed to pull out a couple of stories, but I'll cover. There's one quickly here on Vishnu. If you search Vishnu Charan Gosh online, you'll see some very impressive pictures of an Indian bodybuilder, and he was known for his hatha yoga as well. And so in 1923, he founded the College of Physical Education in Calcutta. So here was a very impressive figure, albeit himself. He was very influenced by Yogananda. So he says that Yogananda's method of yogoda, with the body perfection by the will, and a lot of the asanas and the hatha yoga itself very much to influence him and how he approached the bodybuilding and the muscle manipulation techniques that Yogananda taught him. So here's somebody who's went in a slightly different way, of course, to Yogananda, didn't go down the route of being a monk, but in his own right, very impressive figure, very influential as well.
Yeah, pretty cool. Looks quite a lot like Guruji as well, which is quite nice. And a lot of his siblings and like nieces and nephews do actually have that kind of same sort of look, just like him and his mother do. Genes are strong. But Vishnu is also appears in various of the old archival films that we have, like I think it's like Glimpses of a Life Divine. Vishnu is very prominent with Guruji, like behind him and walking with him when he goes to India. He might also have been in the Awake film as well. So yeah, you can definitely recognize him, that's for sure. Whereas with Sananda, you can't really recognize him that much. Sananda must look much more like his father, perhaps.
Yeah. I kind of thought Sananda's in the picture there that I put on the Trello board.
Yeah.
There's the shot where he's obviously a little bit older. In the pictures, I've got a Vishnu where he's just, showing his muscle. Yeah. He's very young and fit and healthy. But I thought actually Sananda there did look a little bit like Yogananda in some of the pictures. It's his nose or his eyes.
Yeah.
There, yeah. But yeah, very clearly all carrying the same genes. And Famu, like I said, there's not an awful lot mentioned. Certainly not an autobiography of Yogi, but online, I did manage to find a bit on the diary that she had kept, and Priyank's going to be kind enough to read this diary of Yogananda's younger sister for us.
Very good find, Chris. In her diary, she wrote what he called her, Tamu. In front of the other members, he often lovingly called her Madhu. When they were alone, Tamu wrote, I had a very high fever and my whole body was wrecked with pain. I had a headache, which was almost unbearable. I didn't want to worry father, so I said nothing. I helped him ready for the office as usual. I brushed his clothes and saw that he had everything he needed. As soon as he left the house, I managed just barely to reach my room to lie down. I placed a cover over me and collapsed and clasped my hands to my chest, praying to God that he would cure me of my fever and pain. I asked him to spare father any worry for me. I heard Mejda coming downstairs, and for a moment he glanced into my room. As I continued my silent prayer, I dozed off to sleep. Suddenly, I was awakened by the gentle touch on my forehead. I opened my eyes. Mejda was standing over me with a sweet expression of compassion. I thought you had gone out, I said to him. When did you return? Oh, my sister, you are feeling so much pain. I knew you were praying to God to take away your pain so that father would not have to worry. So I came back. Just go to sleep now. Mejda stroked my forehead. His touch was so soothing. I soon felt the pain slipping away. I drifted off to sleep. I didn't awaken until early afternoon. When I got up, I discovered that the fever and all pain had vanished.
Such a sweet story, isn't it? The fact that he would stop by the room and already see and sense and know, probably intuitively knowing just exactly what was going on. So pretty lovely story shared by Famu.
Very sweet. And it must be one can't imagine what it would be like to be a sibling of Yogananda. Obviously, Tamu is younger, so she has this natural respect for the elder. But equally, strange would have been being the elder siblings, Sayananda, and who's the elder sister? He's got one elder sister as well. So yeah, equally would have been very strange being the elder brother or sister to Guruji, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about my sister and I growing up. We were probably more antagonistic than this, but there were moments. But certainly that would have been some story to have, and it was very sort of quietly shared by Dhammu, who clearly had a very deep respect for Yogananda.
When they opened the Sirampur temple, this is the Swami Sri Yukteswar is like his a temple dedicated to him in Serampur. Isis opened it. Tamu was actually still alive. This was in 1977. So when their mata dedicated the mandir, she was one of the guests of honor, and she was there for that, which is quite nice. So if you go there, I'm sure there's some pictures somewhere of her being there as well.
When did it open?
1977, this one.
Okay.
In Serampur. And they've just purchased, I believe they've purchased all of the land that Sri Yukteswar, where his hermitage was. So in the coming years and decades, I'm sure it will become a very big retreat center and accommodation for pilgrimage seekers.
Yeah. Sananda would have been alive at the time as well. He actually passed in 1979. But whether he was there or not, I don't know. But just 2 years before he passed, he would have heard of that or known of that, I'm sure, as well, which is nice. And he was quite a close companion, really, of Yogananda in his childhood. And he himself had very much deep religious interest and had a creative spirit. That he was an artist, photographer, mechanic, architect, musician, and an author, finally. As well, and he painted a portrait of the Nobel Prize-winning poet Tagore, which received worldwide acclaim. So he was very special individual as well. And am I going to speak out of turn here? But did he paint the picture that's in the headquarters? SRF headquarters of
I think he's painted a couple of Yogananda paintings. I think he painted that one where he's standing with a staff, and I think that's at Mother Center. So he's a very prominent painter, important for our, because he obviously captured. He knew him personally, so he captured more than others would perhaps.
I love that picture. When I saw that, it really struck me because he captured it really well, where Yogananda is the light, isn't it? The light bringer, and then there's just darkness all around it, but there's Yogananda is bright as as the sun. So super. Yes, such a great painting and portrait of Yogananda. And there's not much on Sananda really in depth in the autobiography of a yogi, but there are bits that we can share, and one of them, maybe we can link it. It's on the SRF website, where there's a segment in Mejda where there's a story of how Sananda and young Mukunda were up to sort of no good. They were being mischievous, disobeying, again, shock horror, the elder and they were sort of picking lychees and doing things that they were told not to do after school. And there's a really interesting story that Sananda shared, that essentially, to summarize it, the Harimasha appeared to them both and said to Yogananda, on no uncertain terms, by your spiritual knowledge, you will deliver those who are suffering but in ignorance, and give a beautiful, very short speech and sort of and disappeared. So Yogananda, young Mukunda, and Sananda sort of returned home, not knowing who it was, but Yogananda obviously sort of knew enough, and when he went back home, he got a picture and showed it to Sananda, saying, this is who that was, and it was Lihir Masha. So that's a great story, and one that maybe we can share that link to the SRF website, and people can read in more detail. But there are a couple bits that we can share on Sananda, Priyanka.
Yes, there's really, I think that story that you mentioned, Chris, with Lihir Masha is also in Mejda as well. That's probably where they quoted it from. Another story from Mejda, which really highlights like an interaction that you would have with an avatar, as we mentioned before. Here it's in Mejda, and it's talking about his samadhi states, and obviously curious bystander siblings, how they responded to that. So this section is pretty nice. So I'll start reading it. One day when I was alone with Mejda, this is Sananda speaking, his younger brother, I asked him what samadhi was and if I could see him in that state. At first he hesitated, saying, "You are too young. You wouldn't understand." Then he paused and said, "All right, come to my room tonight after midnight." I had the lamentable childhood habit of wetting the bed at night, so father used to wake me up about that time and send me to the latrine. Mejda told me to be sure that father had gone back to sleep before I came to his room.
Excited, I had no difficulty in remaining awake that night. Vishnu Thamu and I slept on the floor of our father's room. He slept on a wooden cot. Nalini was married and living with her husband in her father-in-law's house. Mejda slept in the middle bedroom. Father had sent me to the latrine and was sleeping soundly again when the clock struck 12. I quietly got up and made my way to Mejda's room. He was sitting on his bed, meditating. A mat had been spread on the floor in front of his bed in readiness. He asked me to sit on it and then told me,
Samadhi is withdrawing the mind from the body and merging it in God through a method of concentration. Salvation from this world of Maya is achieved through Samadhi. When the mind of the devotee becomes wholly absorbed in the sound that arises in the Anahata chakra, or the 12-petaled lotus of the heart center, the center of feeling, then buddhi or intellect, or the Agna chakra, becomes pure and fixed on God. All motion in the body ceases. When Mejda finished singing, he sat completely motionless. The clock struck 1 a.m. When by 2:30 he had not moved, I was becoming alarmed. I touched his body lightly and called his name, but he remained inert. I held my hand near his nostrils, but there was no sign of breath. I felt his chest, but there was no movement. Then I shook his shoulders firmly and called louder to him. Still no response. By now I was distraught.
Fortunately, father awoke, as was his custom, at 3 o'clock. Seeing that I wasn't in Daru Halu, Shanu bed, he came to Mejda's room. In tears, I told him what had happened. Father sat beside Mejda and practiced pranayama. Then touching Mejda's chest, with one hand he chanted Om softly in his ear. He continued this for more than half an hour. Finally, Mejda's body moved slightly, and after some time, he opened his eyes. But his consciousness remained withdrawn. Father gently massaged Mejda's body for a long time. It was almost dawn before Mejda returned fully to waking consciousness. Father told me to open the windows. Seeing Father beside him, Mejda felt very shy. Nothing was said. Father silently returned to his own room, and I followed. Soon I was fast asleep.
And that was the end of that quite mystical experience. But I'm sure this is one of many, many, many. This Om in the right ear is pretty fascinating, because I think he used to tell his disciples in Mother Center when he was in America later, if ever they want him to come out of samadhi, to chant Om in his right ear. And famously, Dayamata did that when he took his Mahasamadhi, but this time he did not return. So there must be something to this. But what a lovely story, isn't it?
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there. Actually, you could, you could talk about that for some time.
A podcast within a podcast.
Yeah. I mean, that's so cool, isn't it? And the fact that his father knew, so you could say, well, how, or how did the father know? Maybe it had happened before, or somebody advised him, or maybe he was simply that advanced that he knew, either intuitively or through his own doing. what to do. Yeah, a lot of speculation.
Apparently, according to Mejda, when Guruji went to USA, he says in Mejda, I was to have gone as his companion, and my papers were ready, but fate intervened. An unexpected family matter required my presence at home. So imagine that sliding doors moment, eh? If Sananda had joined him in America, what? Yeah, would have been pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I guess if it was meant to be, it would have been made to happen, really. But that it didn't. Obviously, it wasn't meant to be. And it's interesting, how Yogananda felt like, he missed home a lot, and maybe he missed his family dearly. That may have been good on the face of it to have his brother there that he was so close to. But maybe it could have made it more difficult. Who knows? Ultimately, but interesting parts. Thank you very much for pulling those out of Mejda, Priyank.
Pleasure.
Very kind. Now we're looking at the final paragraph, really, that we'll cover here on this episode, and really it is. Oh, sorry, no, I'm getting ahead.
No, you have to go back. Yes,
still going.
Still lots to go in the previous.
We're jumping ahead. We got carried away with the. So we have Yogananda, who was saying how he felt desolation fall over him, and he was getting very close to his younger brothers and sister, and that he had really been crying his eyes out. It says, he'd cried floods of tears for 2 hours after he retreated to his attic. And this attic, it's the famous attic where he says himself many scenes of his turbulent sadhana had taken place. And interestingly, maybe as we can explain, through biology and chemistry, that he says that the tears were an alchemical cleanser. And so there's lots of endorphins and things like that released in tears. But I'm sure, at this point in his journey, he really was quite emotional about leaving his family after his mother had passed and everything that went along with that. So this was all but expected of a quite a young boy or young man at this stage. Now, he said all attachment disappeared. I thought this was super interesting. The footnote that comes with it says that in the Hindu scriptures, they teach that the family attachment is delusive if it does prevent the devotee from seeking God, essentially the giver of all boons, it says here, including the one of loving relatives, not to mention life itself. So Jesus similarly taught that he that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. I think actually that's quite a controversial line I've seen in Christianity, where people might look to say, well, look, Jesus is trying to tear people away from, their family and things like this. But whenever you put it into the context of what we're talking about here, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Really, that God is the the giver of all boons, it says, and as we know in Arjuna, the battle that Arjuna had to wage, that he himself said that they were essentially family members, friends and family, standing opposite him in the battlefield. So we know that in the context of yoga, it makes perfect sense to wage that war, essentially. Priyank?
I think we mentioned previously the various varnashrams, or the various phases of one's life. One of them is where you leave your family and join the hermitage of a guru, and for training and learning. So it's this is kind of like this. It's that way of renouncing family to learn higher things, concepts, is it's almost embedded in the culture, and obviously it sounds quite tough, doesn't it, to be a parent and your child renouncing you, but it's there, and it's in the Bible here as well, as Guruji is quoted, but also later as to temper that, because it is quite hardcore, isn't it? But to temper it later on in this chapter, when he meets Sri Yukteswar, Sri Yukteswar tells him to go back to his family, doesn't he? He says, "Why exclude your?" I'm paraphrasing. Why exclude your your family from your love of God? So there's that. But I think the essence of this is really that, for example, if during your meditations you're thinking about your family and you're doing something wrong, right? If heaven forbid, if your loved one passes away, and you obviously grieve, but if you let that grief completely ruin you emotionally and psychologically, then really this is exactly what I think he's referring to here. My wife and I were just discussing this yesterday, actually, because she's got there's a school in India that teaches classical training, and they wanted a volunteer for quite a long period of time, and so she was really up for it, and I said, yeah, of course you should go. And then she was saying, oh, but it's quite difficult for me and for us, for the relationship, if we were to separate for such a long period of time. It was it's 2 years. And I said, well, our marriage is we even though we're married, we're renunciants in all but taking the actual formal vow. So if there's a calling to do stuff like this, the fact that we're married shouldn't restrict you, right? If Guru calls you for a job, and your marriage, if you can financially afford it, if your family can handle it, then there should be nothing to stop you. So we're pondering over this kind of philosophy right now as we speak, actually, and it's interesting that we're talking about it now in the book as well.
Coincidence, Priyank. At the right time.
Just yesterday, literally, yeah.
It's the little note from Guruji to help clarify it. It's awesome lesson, isn't it? And I suppose we do this in many small ways. You go to university, you do leave your parents, and you have to at some point sort of forsake them to some degree, if you want to try to get ahead in others. But it's a beautiful lesson. The idea is that Yogananda talks about in his lessons as well, right? He has a lesson that touches on this, that you should essentially provide for your family, and if you are lucky enough to have a family, then they do have to be kept in good health and all the rest of it to the best of your ability, but to retreat as often as possible into your duties to God will ultimately never leave you. So we have here Yogananda going through this in quite a quick time. He's decided to leave, and he's talking about it openly, and he goes to his father then, and he says that his resolution to seek God as the friend of friends became adamantine. Such an awesome statement, isn't it? Just became absolute resolute in his mind.
The opening prayer that we have, we recite all of our gurus, and we say Father, Mother, Friend, Beloved God. So I love this paradigm of the friend in capital F, of friends, the ultimate friend. Became, his resolution to seek that friend became adamantine. It's a really, really powerful concept and notion of what a friend, the ultimate relationship of what a friend is.
Yeah. And given that Guruji was born into this family where with Hirmashaya being the guru of his parents, who better to understand his quest, than his father. And after the story that we read from Mejda, he would have known really what was coming. There's no son that would be that advanced that wouldn't
Yeah,
seek God more.
definitely. But I think he also has to play the role and play the Leela, because he's got, all these children and probably grandchildren at this time, maybe even. So if he played a renunciant father, there wouldn't be all the little ones need some sense of normalcy in a father, because they've lost their mother already. So Mukunda had his experience in cosmic consciousness, when he was much older, not when he was really young, as a child. And similarly, so all these other children, even though they may be, yogis later on, as children, they need the security, blanket of a regular family. And I think his father probably played to that tune, and hence he's playing this role, even though with all the experiences that we've heard in Mejda and other, he knows Mukunda's position, and he knows Lahiri Mahashaya's prophecy as well. But he still says this: "I make one last plea."
Yeah. So he makes this plea. Father was distressed, he says. But you're mentioning the sort of the children, his children, Guruji's brothers and sisters. Guruji uses them, this sort of plea, says, "Do not forsake me and your grieving brothers and sisters." And sort of a pause before we started the podcast here, just so I was clear myself and maybe what this was meant to be, which is the acceptance of the brothers and sisters of Guruji's leaving, of him actually, leaving to pursue this spiritual path. And he's saying that, my brothers and sisters, they're grieving for me. He was crying himself. Guruji was crying himself, and I imagine the tears were shared amongst his brothers and sisters. And he said to his father, hey, we've already all accepted it. We need to move on, essentially, in this quest.
This I make one last plea, and do not forsake me and your grieving brothers and sisters. It's such a powerful emotional plea, isn't it, from a parent? And you really feel that emotional pull when you're reading this line. And the next line that follows, it just knocks everything out of the park, doesn't it?
Yeah. How can I tell my love for you, revered Father? But even greater is my love for the Heavenly Father, who has given me the gift of a perfect Father on earth. Let me go, that I someday return with a more divine understanding. He's going to the highest of all universities.
Yeah, red highlighter for certain. What a powerful line. Can you imagine if your child said such a wonderful line?
No, it's wisdom and knowledge beyond his years, really. At that point, I'm sure there was. He doesn't say how his father really responded, apart from with reluctancy. So he says, with reluctant parental consent, he set out to join his friend Chitindra. He was already in Banaras, in the ashram. So yeah, the father, you can imagine, with sort of a heavy head, said, he has his blessings, and off Yogananda then goes onto this new journey. So really a really pivotal sort of small section there, in this longer substantial chapter. But we sort of turn the page, as it were, on that part of Yogananda's life where he was growing up, and he tried to run away many times, and we covered that in good detail before, where Yogananda was struggling to sort of flee to the Himalayas, and now he's more of a younger man, he's really went as an adult and asked for consent to leave, and he's been granted it. So we sort of put that chapter of Yogananda's life behind us in some way, and we look forward. So here we have, I'll say it correctly this time, the final part of this part of the chapter that we're going to cover, and it is this cordial greeting that Yogananda received. So he arrived and was greeted cordially. He arrived at the hermitage and was greeted cordially by Swami Dayananda. And he was described as Yogananda here as tall, thin, of thoughtful mien. And he was very impressed, Yogananda, very impressed by Swami Dayananda. And his face is described as Buddha-like composure. And there's a lovely, I saw online, if anybody wants to do it, you can kind of quickly Google it and find a drawing, I think this one is, of Swami Dayananda in lotus posture, and with his garm and his hair tied up, so longer hair tied up, and a bit of a goatee going on there, like a very sort of soft face and very young person there. So that's nice to bring that to life. But we have maybe a couple bits to read on Swami Dayananda, Priyank.
Yes. So as we mentioned previously, there's a picture of his guru, Swami Gyanananda, later in the book. So Swami Dayananda looks a bit like his guru, actually. He's copied his hairstyle a little bit. But Swami Gyanananda's hairstyle is fantastic, isn't it? Dreadlocks like wound up into a massive bun. But yeah, Swami Satyananda talks about this faith, the meeting between these two souls, and he writes, when they first met, Mukunda was very drawn to the ever youthful, radiant, tranquil countenanced young Swami Dayananda. It seemed that he was the model of the renunciant life. Within a short while, both became endeared to each other. The intellectual Brahmin progeny, Dayananda, ignored his BA exams, wrote some spiritual tenets on the test paper, left home, and began to live as a disciple sadhak at his feet of his guru, Swami Gyanananda.
Yeah. So with the financial help of the Indian government, Swami Yogananda Maharaj who had founded a Brahma Vidyala College of Divinity in Banaras. Its philosophy based on the fact that all religions were reflected in the model of Sanatana Dharma, the universal religion, and to run the operations of that school. He had been training Swami Dayananda, unbeknownst to the masses. The visionary and dedicated teacher Yoganandaji attained an exalted level in the world of education. His deeply knowledgeable Bengali and Hindi talks and scriptural lectures were listened to by captivated audiences. The being and character of Dayananda seized Mukunda with fervor.
So a little bit more about Swami Dayananda, which neither of us could find much about him, but thankfully Swami Satyananda has given us a little bit. And it's also kind of later on we hear that Swami Dayananda, was out on travels, doing various meetings and on various matters of business, and you can kind of see what he was doing here, giving talks and things like that, education, and pretty cool guy.
Would have been a very powerful time in Mukunda's life, and one of great change, that he was finally sort of going out on his own and seeking spiritual discipline, as he puts it, and he certainly finds it in this hermitage. We're going to delve into a little bit more about his experiences in future episodes, future podcasts. So certainly some nice pictures included there, so do check them out in the book if you have it. If you don't have it, jump online. There's some great pictures online to bring it all to life for us. But so that concludes this part of chapter 10. We will continue as always next time. Mike will be back at leading, and Lauren, I believe, will be with us as well. So we'll be back to full strength next time. But Priyank, is there anything you would want to cover?
Yeah, just this one-to-one podcast, Chris. Hasn't been too bad actually. I thought, oh no, I have to talk a lot, but it's been
all right. I was worried actually. I have a cold, so I was worried I was going to be coughing halfway through. So you're going to be left sort of picking up the slack just on your own. It was just going to be a one-man podcast.
But maybe you found that story of Tamil being ill and Mukunda healing him. You must have taken it to heart, and your voice is held up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, find inspiration. But no, it's worked out okay, hasn't it? And obviously the guys are deeply missed. But
so do you think we should start a spin-off podcast?
I'm just happy, Brent, you didn't have too many hospital passes, because there's no one else to get them. Usually I try to fob them off the mic.
He's always good for a difficult question.
Yeah. But they'll be back next time, so we'll be of course. So thanks to everybody for joining. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru. Jai Ma.